deep in the wild heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where the mist whispers secrets only the pines can hear. 17-year-old Jacob Morrison lived a quiet life of survival and silence. But one morning near Miller's Creek, the world changed. He found her lying there, unconscious, drenched in mud and fear, a young woman dressed in clothes finer than any he had ever seen. Her name was Anna, though even she didn't know that yet. She had no memory, no sense of where she came from, only the tremor of fear behind her fragile voice. Jacob carried her back to his family's small cabin, where his mother Ruth and sister Mary nursed her back to life. Day by day her strength returned, and so did something else, hints of grace and knowledge that didn't belong to these hills. When she stitched Jacob's bleeding hand with the skill of a trained doctor, or played melodies on his father's old guitar like someone who'd studied under chandeliers, Jacob began to realize she wasn't just lost, she was running. She spoke sometimes in her sleep, words of law, contracts, and threats, things that made no sense to mountain folk but carried the weight of danger. And when she looked out toward the horizon with a faraway sadness, Jacob could feel it. Her past was out there, hunting her, even if she didn't yet remember why. Life on the mountain began to heal her, but the mystery of who she was deepened. A silver locket sat on the cabin's windowsill, the initials E.H. engraved on its surface. Anna claimed she didn't know it, yet her fingers always found her throat as if searching for it. She worked hard, learning to cook, tend the animals, and mix herbs that cured Ruth's cough better than any doctor. When she smiled, the cabin felt brighter, and Jacob found himself thinking of her long after dark. But peace never lasts in stories like this. One day, a writer brought news from town, a wanted poster. A sketch of Anna's face offering a fortune for her return. The name beneath it chilled her blood. Elizabeth Harrington, missing heiress of Harrington Industries. In that moment, memories began to break through like cracks in glass. The grand halls of a mansion, the weight of expectation, and a man with eyes that looked at her not with love but ownership. She was Anna at all. She was Elizabeth, the daughter of one of the richest men in the East, and she had run from an arranged marriage to a man named Bradford Stone, a businessman whose charm hid cruelty sharp enough to draw blood. The mountains that had saved her were now the only place left to hide. But city men had money, horses, and guns, and soon they'd have a trail. Jacob didn't hesitate. The moment he saw fear in Elizabeth's eyes, he packed their supplies and led her deep into the wilderness where no outsider could follow. The mountains were his blood. He knew which paths whispered safety and which meant death. Together, they hid in caves behind waterfalls, cooked over silent fires, and spoke in whispers that carried more than words. As they fled, Elizabeth's memories returned in painful flashes. A wedding dress, a storm, and her father's voice insisting she marry Bradford to save the family business. The realization hit hard. She had fled her own wedding. Bradford wasn't just a suitor. He was a predator in a tailored suit, a man who saw marriage as acquisition. And now she understood the reward posters weren't about finding a lost bride. They were about retrieving stolen property. Yet amid the fear, love took root. As they climbed higher, she learned his ways, how to read the sky, how to move without leaving tracks, how to listen to silence. He taught her survival, and she taught him reason, and in the rhythm of running and resting, they found each other. When Jacob caught her staring at the stars one night, he realized he no longer wanted to save her. He wanted to stay beside her, no matter what it cost. And when they kissed beneath the mountain waterfall, the wilderness itself seemed to hold its breath. Days later, while gathering firewood, Elizabeth found a torn letter half buried in her jacket pocket. Its heading read Marriage Contract, Breach and Consequences. That one paper shattered the last illusion she had about her past. She remembered everything: her real name, her father's empire, and the truth of her escape. Her father had arranged her marriage to Bradford Stone to merge their companies, trading her life for profit. Bradford had threatened to destroy Harrington Industries and ruin hundreds of workers' families if she refused. He even held her father's legal debts as leverage. Elizabeth had stood at the altar that morning in a dress worth more than most families would earn in a lifetime. But when she saw Bradford's smirk, the satisfaction of ownership, she ran, barefoot through storm and mud until the mountains claimed her. Jacob listened silently, his jaw tight as she told the story. When she finished, she expected him to see her as a burden. Instead, he said quietly, "Tea. Then we'll make sure you never have to run again." That night, for the first time, she wept, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of being seen, truly seen for who she was. Her journal became her anchor. Each word she wrote a bridge between the woman she had been and the one she was becoming. When winter began to bite, Jacob brought Elizabeth to the home of his distant kin, the Loud family, mountain folk who lived so deep the world forgot them. They took her in without question, wrapping her in his grandmother's handmade quilt, stitched from scraps of a lifetime. "Mountain folk protect their own," old Moira Loud said, eyes soft but knowing. Under their roof, Elizabeth learned what real work felt like: smoking meat, chopping wood, preserving vegetables for winter. Her soft hands grew calloused, her laughter grew louder, and her heart grew steady. For the first time, she felt part of something that didn't demand perfection, only honesty. The community came to know her not as a runaway heiress, but as one of their own. She taught the children to read, wrote letters for families who couldn't, and tended the sick with skill that amazed them all. The quilt became her shield, each stitch a symbol of belonging. And for Jacob, watching her move among his people was like watching the mountains themselves accept her. He loved her not because she was from another world, but because she had chosen his. Yet danger still lingered in the valley. Bradford's men were getting closer, and the telegram that Tommy Briggs smuggled up from town confirmed their worst fear. Bradford had authorization for all necessary measures. The hunt wasn't just for love, it was for control of an empire. When Bradford's telegram revealed her father's failing health, Elizabeth understood the stakes. If her father died, Bradford would seize control of Harrington Industries. The marriage had never been about love. It was a corporate war disguised as romance. But this time she refused to be a pawn. With Jacob and the mountain families, she began to plan, mapping the valleys and ridges with military precision. They weren't soldiers, but they were mountain folk, people who'd fought railroads and mining companies before. Jacob turned every stream crossing and cliff into a weapon, every cave into refuge. "They'll never understand how to fight on our land," he said, pointing to the map. Elizabeth marveled as the community rallied around her, people who barely knew her but were willing to risk everything for her freedom. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Moira smiled and said, "Because family isn't who you're born to, it's who stands with you when the storm comes." That night, Elizabeth made her choice. She would not keep running. She would return not to surrender, but to expose the truth, to fight Bradford with the only weapon he couldn't control, the truth itself. When dawn broke over the mountain ridge, Bradford Stone arrived with 6 armed men, their polished boots sinking into mud that would never welcome them. Elizabeth stepped out onto the porch in simple mountain clothes, Jacob's rifle resting against the wall. Bradford called her name with arrogance, but she didn't flinch. "You've turned yourself into a peasant," he sneered. "Come home before you destroy your father's company." Elizabeth's voice was calm, steady, full of new strength. I've already seen what destroys a company, men who think people are property. Bradford's charm faltered as she held his gaze. You can't win this. Your defiance will ruin your family. She took a breath. You ruined it the moment you poisoned my mother. The words cut like a blade. She defound the evidence in his own briefcase, proof of his crimes, his thefts, his murders. Bradford's mask slipped completely. You don't understand the game you're playing, he hissed. Jacob's voice came low and sure behind her. Mountain folk don't play games, we end them. The standoff stretched thin as frost. The rifle in Jacob's hands gleamed in the morning light. And for the first time, Bradford Stone saw something money could never buy, courage that didn't bend. Days later, when the danger passed and Bradford's crimes were exposed, Elizabeth stood before the mountain community holding the very wedding dress she once wore to her own imprisonment. The silk was stained, the lace torn, yet it shimmered in the morning sun like the ghost of her old life. This dress was made to display wealth, she said softly, but it never brought me peace. So today it will serve a better purpose. With Jacob's grandmother's scissors, she cut through the first sleeve. The sound was sharp and final. Piece by piece, the women of the mountain joined her, turning the gown into shirts for children, blankets for the sick, and gowns for new mothers. Every cut was an act of defiance, every stitch a declaration of freedom. Let Bradford have his empire, Elizabeth said, her voice rising with conviction. I've found mine right here. The mountains echoed with quiet pride as she wrapped the last scrap of silk around an infant's blanket. The runaway heiress was gone. In her place stood a woman who had turned fear into strength, wealth into purpose, and love into home. And as the fire crackled that night, Jacob took her hand beneath the stars. You gave up everything, he whispered. She smiled. No, she said softly, I finally chose something real. And for everyone listening to this story, if you believe courage and love can build new worlds from broken ones, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow there's another story waiting, one you won't want to miss.